It is meaningful that this conversation occurs on Veterans Day, when we pay tribute to those who serve and sacrifice for our country. We also recognize the corrosive cost of war and those affected by it. On November 13th, the Dubuque Museum of Art opens a major exhibition of Vietnam War photography that features more than 50 iconic Associated Press images that transformed Americans' understanding of soldiers and civilians on both sides of the conflict. Visitors will explore artifacts carried by US soldiers into battle and an installation inspired by Tim O'Brien's book, The Things They Carried. The library will hold a discussion of that book on November 30th. You will be able to listen to newly recorded oral histories that bring local veterans' memories to life publicly for the first time. View exhibitions of reporting of the Vietnam War by local journalists Bob Woodward Jr. and Jim Galatis, and photographs by Ron Testa, an official Navy combat photographer. Please consult the museum's website at dbqart.org for a complete list of programs. Now I would like to extend a personal invitation to all of you to join us for the opening reception at the Dubuque Museum of Art this Saturday, November 13th, beginning at 12:30 p.m. The Marine Corps League Color Guard of Dubuque will perform a flag raising ceremony, followed by a reception and a talk by photographer Ron Testa. On Sunday, November 14th at 1:30, Terry Van Dorsten of the Veterans Memorial Building in Cedar Rapids will present a talk on Grant Wood's memorial window. The programs are supported by Humanities Iowa and the National Endowment for the Humanities. The Q&A and book discussion are also sponsored in part by Carnegie-Stout Public Library Foundation. The views and opinions expressed by these programs do not necessarily reflect those of Humanities Iowa, National Endowment for the Humanities, or Carnegie-Stout Public Library Foundation. I will now turn the program over to Mike May, Carnegie-Stout Adult Services Librarian. Mike will introduce our guests and moderate the Q&A this evening. Thank you.
Margie, thank you very much. It's an honor to be a part of Vietnam, the Real War, the exhibition at Dubuque Museum of Art. Thank you to everyone for being here this evening. We have a lot of different people here. I've seen from the registrations, people include notes, and I know that we have Vietnam veterans and their families. One person on the registration wrote this: "My brother, a U.S. Marine, was killed in action on June 7th, 1969 in the Quang Nam province in South Vietnam. Our other brother enlisted in the U.S. Marine Corps and also served in Vietnam. Fortunately, he was able to return home uninjured physically." And he writes about his experiences as a way to address the anguish he continues to feel for the loss of our brother. We also have people joining us from who have lived in Tim O'Brien's hometown. I had this note in the registration forms: "I grew up in Mr. O'Brien's hometown of Worthington, Minnesota as a young college student, and was pleased to meet him at the Page by Page bookstore there when he did a book signing after Going After Ketchiato was released. I've always wanted to tell him how nice his dad was when he would come to the county library where I worked then." We also have a whole slew of high school and college English teachers. And there might even be one or two students joining us. So welcome everyone. If you are in Dubuque, Iowa, we're really looking forward to meeting everyone at the opening reception on Saturday, November 13th at the Dubuque Museum of Art. There's information about that included in the emails that we sent out that had the Zoom links for this meeting. So be sure to check that out, and we hope to see you there on Saturday. Also, former library director Susan Henricks is leading a discussion of the things they carried at the library on November 30th. The books can be checked out now from Carnegie-Stout Public Library, and we're also doing the giveaway of 10 copies of the things they carried in paperback. And I will be drawing those names and notifying the winners in the coming days, so be sure to watch out for that. about the Zoom event this evening. If we happen to have any technical difficulties, please retry to join the Zoom using the same link that you received earlier by email. We are recording the video and we will share the links later by email, and those will also be shared on Facebook and YouTube, so be sure to watch for that as well. I have turned on closed captioning if people find that helpful. If you look in your Zoom settings, you should be able to turn those on and see those during this meeting. We'll keep the cameras and the microphones muted until a little bit later on when we have an audience question and answer session. And if you would like to ask a question, there's a chat function. If you type in the chat, I would like to ask a question, then I'll get to you and you can turn your camera and audio on and ask it. If you don't feel comfortable doing that and you'd rather not be on camera or in the recording, you could type your question into the chat and I would just read it anonymously. And that way your question, we'd still get to it. And to give everyone a chance to ask a question who wants to, we're asking that you just limit your question to one or maybe two, like one question and a follow-up. And then hopefully that way it gives a chance to for everybody to participate. Now I would like to introduce Aaron Matthews. Aaron is an award-winning documentary filmmaker, and most recently he made the documentary The War and Peace of Tim O'Brien. We sent the links out to that for people to view, and it was available through today. And I really hope you had a chance to watch that. If you didn't have a chance, I'll ask Aaron a little bit later in the evening about how we can access that. I know it's available widely on most platforms where you can rent or purchase films, and Carnegie-Stout Library also has this on DVD and Blu-ray. Aaron also made The Paper in 2008, a documentary that goes behind the scenes at a university newspaper, and also A Panther in Africa in 2004 about the legacy of the 1960s through the eyes of a former Black Panther and American exile, Pete O'Neill. And he also made My American Girls in 2001, which captures the joys and struggles of one Dominican family's immigrant experience in Brooklyn. And he also produced and edited the Oscar-winning short film Colette in 2020. And that was about a 90-year-old French resistance fighter who visits the site where Nazis killed her brother. And a lot of these films appear on the PBS POV documentary series. And I know Aaron has been involved in a lot of other television and filmmaking projects. And he's joining us this evening, I believe, from Brooklyn. Thank you very much for joining us, Aaron.
Well, thank you so much for having me and Tim. I'm really excited and grateful that you put this together with the Dubuque Museum of Art and Carnegie-Stout Public Library. Very grateful. And I'm assuming everyone has watched the film. If you haven't, I'll just give you a quick little intro. If you don't know Tim O'Brien, he's one of the great living American writers. He's a Vietnam veteran, National Book Award winner, and author of the groundbreaking book, The Things They Carried. And the film I made about Tim follows him writing one last book. Tim and his family really generously, bravely opened up their lives to me and my camera for over 4 years. And my hope was that you get a deep sense of what it takes to create something, what war does to you, and the challenges of balancing your art with your family. So I know I'm looking forward to your questions and talking with you all. Thank you all for showing up.
Thanks, Aaron. Tim O'Brien is also with us, and of course, he's an award-winning author. Tim grew up in Worthington, Minnesota, which is about 300 miles northwest of Dubuque. Earlier, Tim was telling me about having visited Galena, so I'm sure if he came to Galena, there's a good chance he's been to Dubuque before. He graduated from Macalester College in 1968 and was drafted into the U.S. Army. And from February 1969 to March 1970, he served as a foot soldier in combat in the Vietnam War. He has written many books, and some of them include If I Die in a Combat Zone, Box Me Up and Ship Me Home from 1973, Going After Cacciato in 1978, which won the 1979 National Book Award, The Things They Carried in 1990. That sold over 2 million copies worldwide and was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize and National Book Critics Circle Award. He also wrote In the Lake of the Woods in 1994, and he took about a 15-year break and recently published Dad's Maybe book in 2019. And of course, the Dad's Maybe book is kind of the main focus of Aaron's documentary film, The War and Peace of Tim O'Brien. And Tim, thank you very much for joining us.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you again for having me. It'll be fun to spend time with Aaron. I really miss him. He lived with me for 4 years or so, it seemed, on and off. And we dedicated our upstairs bedroom to Aaron. He's got a little shrine up there for him. Aaron was just a great person to be around for many, many, many sessions that we had together. Some pretty tough family things went on during this period. My two sons got hooked on video games, and Aaron was present during a session in which I threatened to throw their computers out the window and their iPads and all their other electronic devices. The children were not happy, and Aaron had a camera with him. I'm really grateful to him for not filming the whole thing. It lasted about 3 hours of back and forth. I learned that both my kids could be politicians. They finally convinced me with their argumentation to let them keep the computers and the video devices. We reached a compromise of, I can't remember what it was now. And the reason I can't remember is that the compromise lasted a half an hour and they were back to full-time video people. The good news is they're both great students and both great kids, and Aaron got to participate in their lives for 4 really important years. So I look forward to the questions and to the evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Aaron summarized the film a little bit, but I wanted to say again, it follows Tim and his family as he works on writing Dad's Maybe book. Tim had 2 boys late in life and realized he probably wouldn't be around long enough to really get to know them as they became adults. And he decided that he wanted Timmy and Tad, his 2 boys, to hear his voice after he was gone. So he, after having had a 15-year break from writing, he began Dad's Maybe book. And the book and the documentary, they're both about family, writing, war, morality, and about life. So with that, I wanted to ask Aaron, when did you first hear about Tim O'Brien, and how did the idea of making a documentary with Tim develop? And what was it about Tim's life story that you you found so compelling?
Well, I met Tim working on another film. I was making a PBS documentary about the military draft, and Tim was one of the many people we interviewed for that project. And basically, I didn't want to stop talking with him. And I thought, how can I keep this interview going? So I made the movie. And that was in 2015 when I met Tim. And it actually took about a year to convince him that that this was a worthy project. He was pretty reluctant, but I'm also pretty persistent, and I think I wore him down in the end. Also, the first time I interviewed Tim, the interview took place in his house, and it was before one of his magic shows. So there were like giant contraptions and cages all over the house, and right next to me was this shiny new guillotine, sharp blades and all, and of course the interview frame was filled with cinematic smoke. And then he told me about an upcoming gambling trip he was taking, and also that he was devoted to this new family, that he was an older father, and I was intrigued. I just thought this was like the stuff of a movie. He also mentioned that he had this book that he was in the middle of writing, or had started, like 13, 14, 15 years ago, but was probably never going to finish it. And I thought, I'll just follow him trying to finish this last book. Maybe he won't finish it for a long time, and I'll be able to do this film for a long time and be able to just keep filming Tim for a long time. But at one point in the middle of filming, like, Tim turned on the gas and told me he had written like 250 pages since the last time I'd seen him. I was like, uh-oh, I have an ending to the film. I better start putting this thing together. So that's a short answer of how I met Tim and how it started.
Well, Tim, what did you think when Aaron approached you? You've had some previous experience appearing in films and writing for films, but this seems like it was a lot more involved than anything you had ever done before.
Yeah, it really wasn't the involvement that worried me. It was, I'm a guy who sits on his butt 12 hours a day and stares at a computer, and I couldn't really see the drama in watching a guy sit there typing. One of the wonderful things about Aaron doing this film is that he was able to really find the drama in an ordinary life, a family life, the ups and downs of a family, the struggle of a writer to get another paragraph done or another sentence done, pushing something forward over several years. And he really did mine the drama in an ordinary life. I think he could probably do it by do the same thing with any member of the audience tonight, that he's a professional and an expert at finding that which has some tension to it and maybe some humor to it. And so it was really a great experience to find him constantly reassuring me there'll be drama, even if there's no drama, there'll be drama. I didn't quite understand that statement, but he managed to do it. One of the greatest joys, though, really was making a new and really wonderful friend. We talk a lot together about our lives and his new projects, the book I'm now working on, a new one, and about our families. And we keep trying to plan a time to get together. But because of COVID, we haven't really been able to yet. But maybe one of these years, COVID will, once we're all vaccinated, will, go its way, and Aaron and I can get together again. So all in all, it was really a wonderful experience.
Before you got to know Aaron so well, did your family, Meredith and Timmy and Tad, did you have to convince them to participate, or how did they feel about the idea of making a movie like this?
Well, they were pretty young when we started. Now my older son is in his first year of college at the University of Chicago. My younger son is a sophomore in high school. But when we started back in I think it was 2014 or 15, they were young, and because they were young, they were kind of ho hum about it. Um, they didn't get excited one way or the other. I think what really won them over was Aaron's personality, that he became part of the family in a way. He would cook meals and, do dishes, and was really part of the family. And they became really, really comfortable with him. And so when the kids were being filmed, which was a lot, they felt they were in the presence of a close friend. So they enjoyed it.
That was also really the only way I could have afforded to make this film, is if I actually was embedded with Tim and his family. So thankfully they put me up, and yeah, I'm so grateful for them and for getting to know them. And I miss them too.
Aaron, you were away from your family quite a bit. Were you living in Brooklyn and commuting to Austin to do this?
I was, yeah. And I was also very conscious of how I was leaving my family in order to tell the story of someone else's family. And it felt a little perverse at times, because I was very conscious of that dynamic, because that's what the film was about. It was about balancing family and art in a way, and watching Tim do that with his family. Our kids are virtually the same ages. So there were a lot of parallels between our two families. And I felt very fortunate that I got to really get an insider's look at someone else's family and how they dealt with all the things that I was dealing with: phone time and homework and bedtime and everything, all the mundane things that a family deals with, and all the struggles that families go through as well. Like, how do you deal with tense situations and difficult things that arise. I got a front row seat at someone else's life, and that was really something I'm extremely grateful for, and tried to put a lot of that in the film.
It must not have always been easy to be there during some of those tense moments that families have. How did you deal with that?
Well, like Tim said, I was there for a lot of the time when I wasn't filming at all. I was, I most of the time making this film, I didn't have a camera in my hands. And I think that's why the film feels so personal and intimate, because I wasn't filming all the time. And I can say this about the O'Briens, apart from being like a wonderful family, and you can see the kids are both whip smart. Meredith is lovely, a lovely person who's extremely intelligent, and Tim is just an ordinary person, regular. No, and Tim is actually an extraordinary person. We can talk about that later or throughout the night, because he is really someone who just from the get-go really, like I said, I never wanted to stop talking to him. But I lost my train of thought. What was your question about with the kids?
There must have been times when things didn't go so well, and I was curious about, was there ever a point where you thought maybe this isn't working very well?
All the time. That's I was told by a friend and mentor long ago that if you don't have that feeling that things aren't going so well, you should check yourself, because it means you're not thinking hard enough about your story and about what's happening. So I there were many times where like the filming itself, I thought like, well, that this might not amount to much, but I also had faith in hanging around long enough and waiting for events to happen, and also just trusting in Tim's honesty and the fact that candor is really captivating. And I think we're so unaccustomed to speaking honestly, to hearing people talk frankly to us, that like when you get someone like Tim, who, you know, is like a radical truth teller, it makes you sit up and pay attention. And so like when things were going badly, I trusted in Tim, and the idea of like doing a film that was warts and all and intimate and not whitewashed, you know, that it would be revealing in ways that, you know, we hadn't seen before, especially about like the inner workings of a writer, and you know, usually films like these are Valentines, and to Tim's great credit, he lets his guard down often in this film. So those were the moments that saved me and perked me up and helped me through times when I felt like, oh, none of this is working, or there's no story here.
Did you have a story, or what was your thinking in the beginning, and how did it change during the process? Like, you started off with one idea, but then did you discover things that changed your direction?
I did, yeah. You know, initially I was really interested in the military civilian divide, because that was what the draft was about. And so, and, you know, I became aware of that divide doing that film, and the 25 million Americans who've served in the military and the consequence of the divide for our country. And initially, I wanted to look more deeply at how disconnected we are from the wars we wage, and how so few people bear the burden of killing and dying. And I thought Tim was able to shed light on this issue in particular in a way that would make Americans pay attention. And I think he does that. But as I hung around him, I saw the film was about much more, and it was about, you know, all the themes you mentioned, and mortality and aging and family and art. Then there were very concrete ways that the film changed. So I imagined in the beginning that there were going to be a number of like stylized reenactments of his book in progress. And I don't think that's a terrible idea, but the more I filmed with the family, the more the imagery that I collected was really of his present day, and very raw and compelling. And I really wanted to tell a story in the here and now, especially because I was aware that a film about a writer could be, you know, kind of dull. But Tim has this inherent kinetic energy that really goes a long way. You know, even when he's talking, there's a twinkle in his eye, or, you know, you can see it in the way he flicks his cigarette. There's like an inner energy that is compelling to watch.
So Tim, I imagine you really haven't had someone watching you write like this ever before. What was, besides that, what was the experience of having someone living with you and making a movie about you? Could you describe that, or is it like anything you had ever experienced before?
No, it was unlike everything else I've experienced in my life. It was a new chapter, brand new. I never actually wrote with Aaron filming. That would be impossible. I'd be too self-conscious and aware of the camera. A writer lives mostly inside the head, and you're staring at a computer, but kind of looking through the computer, and you're seeing your characters behaving and falling in love or whatever they're doing. And it's a very private interior thing going on in the imagination. And you're simultaneously trying to find language, words to represent what you're witnessing in your head. And you can't do it with a camera on you. You're too aware of the external stuff. So the way Aaron and I would work is he would go away for a couple of weeks, 3 weeks sometimes, and come back. And I'd have written in the meantime, while he was gone, I will have written pages. And then he and I would talk about where the book was going and what the chapter was about that I was working on when he arrived. And he'd occasionally have me read portions that I'd already written aloud for the camera. And some of those little clips of reading found their way into the film. What Aaron really mostly witnessed was the toll that writing takes. You're your own boss. You make yourself go to work every day. In my own case, I was getting up at 2:30, 3, 4 in the morning, going to work and working till about 10, and then spending the rest of the day with my kids. I was determined I was going to be a good father, even though I was working on a book. And I pretty much was faithful to that when Aaron was here. I would get up pretty early in the morning while everybody else was asleep. I'd write. And then when people started waking up, I would, leave the writing behind. I was not used to that. I was used to, if not writing all day, thinking about my writing all day, the problems I faced, recalcitrant sentence that I couldn't, find a graceful conclusion to. It would nag at me all day long. And when that was the old me, but with Aaron there, I had to leave it behind, and that was good for me. It made the book actually, I think, go quite a bit faster. There were pluses and minuses to having a camera on you so much. One of the pluses is that it forced me to try to be more brief than ordinarily I am. I kind of ramble when I talk, and the camera made me be more succinct and aware of how much an audience could tolerate before they, fall asleep or just turn you off. I was always aware of how to say things briefly, succinctly, and kind of visually, so the camera could see what I was talking about through looking at my eyes. There was one scene I remember in the film in which Aaron had me, I had my computer on, and there was a photograph from Vietnam on the computer of a guy holding up an ear, one of my comrades back in Vietnam, that night he had chopped off a corpse that a guy he'd killed, a Vietnamese guy. 2 of them he'd killed. And I was staring at that ear being held up on my computer, and Aaron was kind of behind me and got a shot of it. And I got really angry. It's one of the best parts, I think, of the film in a way, is how my anger came through it. If this were done to an American soldier and you had that on your computer, I mean, you wouldn't tolerate it. Americans would go bonkers if it were your kid whose ear was dangling on your computer. And that anger that came out of me about that atrocity, Aaron captured. I don't think if he hadn't been in the room that day and seen that photograph, I'm not sure that would have been in the film. It was sort of kind of serendipity that it happened. So there were many moments like that where just accidents would happen. One day I was pulling out of my driveway and my car just stopped on the way going up you go out of my driveway uphill, backing up. And everything went off except the engine. The power steering went off. I couldn't turn and the car kind of chugged up this hill very, very slowly, and it started drifting down the hill. Aaron learned some new vocabulary that came out of my mouth as I was so pissed off about this. He heard words he never heard before, and hopes he'll never hear again. He filmed it all, including the phone call I made to the mechanics, who also ticked me off. Another time he caught me, we were going somewhere to film something where I teach, and I stopped for gas, and I put my credit card in the machine, but the credit card I put into the place where the receipt comes out, and it just sucked up my credit card. It was inside with all the paper that makes the receipts. But I didn't know that for, I don't know how long, for 3 minutes. I was cussing this machine won't give my credit card back. Some good laughs came out of that. I think I know it found its way into the film. So a lot of it, although the writing of a book is the linear story, you know, a writer struggling to finish a book. Some of the best parts of the film are these little moments of serendipity where things occur and they're funny or they're sad, or sometimes they're even dramatic. And those were the moments that I think Aaron really was hoping he would get for his film. And he did get them.
Tim's colorful use of curse words is definitely a motivation for seeing this film. And I do think of it as a family movie, actually, because there's so much about raising kids and the difficulties inherent in that. But it's just a family film with a lot of cursing.
Aaron, you're a very experienced filmmaker before making this, but was there anything that you learned working on this project about filmmaking or about storytelling? I mean, I imagine you hadn't had an experience where you observed maybe another artist in this degree creating.
Yeah, that was the real gift of this movie for me, because the writing of Tim's book was this parallel project that was going on as I was trying to make a story about him writing a book. And, you know, it feels almost, you know, unkind to say, but I was heartened and comforted by seeing him, you know, pulling his hair out, trying to struggle with his sentence, because it made me feel like, okay, you know, like even Tim O'Brien has this feeling where he wants to chuck his computer out the window, because that's how I feel often when I'm trying to put together a story and things don't feel right, or the flow isn't right, or you know, going from point A to point B isn't as exciting as I thought, you know? And so seeing a master storyteller struggle was, yeah, it was comforting in this way that I also thought audiences would find, you know, they could relate to it and also be interested in, because that essentially the film is about someone trying to do something really, really hard. And we all have that version of the hard thing we're trying to do in our lives. He's trying to write a book, and, you know, maybe you're trying to, you know, do the work that you usually do, or hand a paper in on time, or whatever it is. But so on that level, on this, like the big broad level, I felt very much like the film and the writing of the book were intertwined. But I learned so much also about storytelling. I took a crash course in Tim's books just to do this film, but also being able, in addition to reading everything he's written, reading everything that was written about him, interviewing him about storytelling and about structure, and he became really a collaborator in the best sense, you know. So he would and sometimes inadvertently so, you know, like he would be talking about his own writing and talk about how, you know, exposition kills your story, that you have to trust your reader and audience to understand the themes that you're after without, you know, explaining it or hitting them over the head. And that is a lesson that should be applied to all storytelling, you know, that you go through and you kind of eliminate those times. I know with me, whenever I'm cutting a scene, there's always too much voiceover in my first draft, so of like characters explaining what's happening and the themes that I want, because it all seems so important to me at the time that I have to make it clear to everyone what the scene is about. And you know what I learned with Tim, or it's a lesson that I kind of knew but was like really hammered home by Tim, or it was elucidated for me, you know, watching him, was that you just kind of have to go through and erase a lot of the time, so that you're leaving more space for viewers to personalize the scene and you know, bring their own experiences to it. It's what makes it interesting, you know. You know, the idea of writing, of discovering your story through writing. Tim talks about that. You know, when I asked him about how he came up with dialogue, he said, you know, I talked to myself, and then and he went on to say that the purpose of dialogue really for him, one of the main purposes was to discover the story. And I found that fascinating, because that's what I'm doing in documentary film. You know, when I'm taking the dialogue and I'm stringing it together, and often scenes are way too long, but making the scene with the people, you know, with the characters talking is helping me string together ideas that will eventually create, you know, an arc. But you don't know it until you kind of get the people talking and you keep the conversation going. You're trying to connect disparate or seemingly disparate ideas and sentences, you know, abutting one scene to a next, and you know. So anyway, yeah, I was constantly like peppering him with questions about writing and story, a lot of times just for selfish purposes, because I thought like, oh, maybe this will make its way into the film, but mostly I wanted to know for myself, like, how do you solve this problem? How does this go for you? And he's like extremely lyrical about like the way he solves problems, and also generous and open. You know, there are lots of artists who, you know, face struggles when they're writing, and also lots of Americans who are, you know, have difficulties with America's involvement in war. But there are very few people who are open enough and honest enough to let us witness their thinking and their real struggles and reactions to these things. And that's the gift that Tim gave all of us in this film.
Tim, in the documentary and also in Dad's Maybe book, there seem to be a lot of parallels between the act of writing and the experience of combat. And I wanted to ask what you thought about that. There's a scene in the film where you talk about being haunted by the experience of having a hand grenade thrown at you. And I was curious to know, is there any similarity with that to sitting down in front of a blank page?
Well, the blank page is probably not going to kill me or put me in a hospital unless it's a psychiatric hospital. And that's the danger. It's as Aaron tried to explain, and I thought was pretty eloquent about, was it's hard when you're trying to make a piece of art that's somehow fresh to the world and you haven't read before yourself. It's an ongoing imaginative pressure to imagine what next, what could the character do next, what's going to occur. Fiction is made out of human behavior, even if it's personified, like Bambi or something like that, you know, talking animals. And part of behavior is dialogue, but it's also doing things in the world, throwing a hand grenade or ducking from a hand grenade being thrown at you, calling a girl up when you're in high school for your first date. All these are human behaviors. And the struggle is to come up with fresh, new to the world kinds of behaviors that have that gritty feel of happeningness that is new when you're actually doing it yourself. Calling up a girl for a first date is probably a stereotypical sort of human experience. Probably everybody goes through it, or vice versa. You know, girls calling boys. But when you're doing it, it's brand new for the first time. No one else has done it before, and you're feeling things that to you feel like that they're original to the world, only with you. And that's a struggle to try to do that imaginatively, sitting in a room for 5 hours, looking at a computer, trying to imagine something fresh you could bring into the world that the reader won't have experienced before, or at least not experienced exactly this way before. And is it like war? Only in the metaphoric sense, I suppose, or the symbolic sense. War, like writing, is relentless. Even when nothing is happening, there's the feel with you when you're walking through a rice paddy or through the mountains. There's that constant feel that something is about to happen or could happen or will happen, and your mind is on full alert all the time. Even when you're sleeping, you're not, at least I didn't really sleep the way I do now. I was half awake as I slept, alert to sound. And it was relentless. And writing is kind of the same way. It's with me all the time when I'm at work on something. Every day when I come to the computer, there's always this question in the back of my head and sometimes in the front of my head. What will I do today? That I don't outline, I don't make plans for what's going to happen in a book. I just trust in, kind of as Aaron does when he's making a film. I trust that when I sit down and my fingers start moving, characters will do or say something interesting enough for me to find what it is that's interesting about it, and then kind of highlight it or magnify it, and then delete everything which to me at least isn't fascinating as a human spectator, how I feel when I'm writing. I feel like I'm a spectator at a bank robbery, or a spectator at a divorce proceeding. I'm a spectator at it and kind of in it, that I'm the attorney and I'm the woman and I'm the guy getting divorced and I'm the judge. I'm all these characters, and I'm watching all the other characters, but I also am the characters. That again isn't exactly identical to warfare for obvious reasons, but that's kind of how I felt in a war. I felt like a spectator, the stuff going on around me, landmines going off and bodies lying there, and even a spectator when I had to duck away from that hand grenade that came sailing out of the bush. I felt like I was in a movie. This can't be real. If I saw John Wayne do this, when I was a little kid, now I'm doing it. It felt like I was an actor in a very real movie. It also felt just real at the same time, sort of simultaneously. All I remember saying was, dear Jesus, those words. I said them repetitively. Other guys would say things like mama, 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 kind of primitive kind of talk. So I guess there's that similarity, that kind of, when you write a novel, you're going for the deeply primitive, that deeply human place. Sometimes it's a place of terror, the hand grenade. Sometimes it's a place of love. Sometimes it's a celebration of just life itself. It was when my children were born, a kind of celebrative, joyful feeling. Life and fiction are not really separable. They intertwine and they interpenetrate and interlock. I think there's this illusion that fiction lives in one world, novels live in one world, and all the rest of us live somewhere else in another world. But I don't believe that. I believe that the two really interpenetrate.
Aaron, when you were thinking about Tim and his writing, did you see a connection to the struggles he had with creating his art or his work and his experiences with Vietnam? It seems like in the movie that they're very, very closely related.
Yeah, I mean, I think struggle is a big theme in the film. And another one of the reasons I was drawn to Tim as a character is that he seemed to be in constant struggle and conflict with himself, you know, and his past and his country. And when I say struggle, I mean that in a good way, that, you know, in a way that we should all be struggling to examine our lives and our actions and our country's actions. And Tim is not someone who sits back and just accepts, you know, the ways of the world and accepts like truisms and cliches. And he's sharp and he's always questioning. And he really embodied for me this idea that, you know, that to live is to struggle, you know, because to live is to care, and caring is a burden. So that struggling is not something that we should be avoiding, you know, but we should be rather paying attention to it. And it's kind of like the way he deals with death and mortality too. He addresses a lot of the things that we tend to push away, both in his writing and in this film. He's willing to embrace themes that we kind of want to turn away from. And I think we turn away from them a lot of times at our own peril.
Tim, what would you say if another veteran asked you for advice about how to talk about their wartime experiences, especially with their families? How do you get beyond stereotypes about the war, about what it means to be a veteran, and start to try to open up to other people?
Well, that's a great question, and I don't have a recipe or a formula for how to do it. It's been trial and error for me with my own family. For a long while, my kids knew I'd been in a war, but they never seemed very curious. In some ways, they still aren't all that curious. I could count on, you know, one finger the number of times they've actually solicited, you know, a story from me. It does come up, though, occasionally at the dinner table or after seeing a news report, you know, coming from Afghanistan or Iraq. And I usually do it through an anecdote or a story of some sort. My mind automatically works that way anyway, that I'm not much of a generalizer about war, because when you generalize, everything is true generally, or can be true. And I'm more the kind of person who prefers the story, even if it's just a little anecdote of a story. And I'll just take it from my memory if I'm asked by my kids or my wife, and I'll tell the story, and that'll be that's what I have to say. Here's what occurred and what I witnessed, what I felt when X, Y, or Z happened. In a way, I'm surprised that my kids are not that curious about a father who had spent a year of his life almost dead all the time. You know, I worked in an AO that was heavily landmined, and it wasn't really battles we were afraid of or gunfire. It was landmines. They call them IEDs now, but they were everywhere in Quang Nam and Quang Ngai province, everywhere. And everything from little things we called toe poppers, which would blow a foot off, to bouncing betties that you'd step on it, it would leap out of the soil and explode about waist high, to booby-trapped artillery rounds that would blow away, 20 guys and kill them all. They were just littered with them. We tried carrying mine detectors, but there was so much shrapnel in the soil that the mine detectors were always going off, whether it was a mine or not, because this area of operations had been so heavily bombed. 75% of the dwellings in Quang Ngai province had been destroyed by the time I got there. 75%. Imagine Dubuque, and 75% of the town is just rubble. That's when I arrived. And a year later, after I left, it was a hell of a lot more than 75% from what I had witnessed. Corpse after corpse after corpse. Most of them Vietnamese, I might add, who don't get much airtime in America. They had 3 million dead. We had, 69,000, something like that, or 60,000, 3 million versus. We know who took the brunt of that war, and they're not a part of our conversation very often, or at least not often enough, especially on a day like today, Veterans Day, where it's all me, my PTSD, my nightmares, my problems with alcohol and divorce, all the things I've carried home from the war. There's an egoism to it that's astonishing. Just in the numerical sense, with the 3 million versus the number of casualties we took. There are two sides in every war, usually more than two. There's probably like 12 sides in most wars. And for some reason, we as Americans like to pretty much concentrate on just our own experiences and our own suffering, forgetting that a lot of other people suffered as well. There's a kind of selfishness to it, and a kind of blindness to it that is irritating. And I talk about it in Aaron's film pretty explicitly, more explicitly than I am now. And I'm being pretty explicit now, but even more so in Aaron's film. I can almost feel my blood pressure rise as I'm talking now, because even though I'm on this kind of Zoom format thing with you people, it's emotional inside me. I can feel my heart going fast as I talk about these things, and they'll stay with me forever. I was a pretty easygoing, happy-go-lucky guy before Vietnam, but I'm pretty much the reverse of that now. I'm not very easygoing, and I'm not very happy-go-lucky.
Do you think that that's one of the reasons why it may be so difficult for a lot of people to talk about openly or honestly?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's one of the reasons when veterans try to talk about these things with people who haven't been in the war, their children or their neighbor or their wives or whomever. I think that there's this impulse to be kind of rational and bury your emotions, push them down, so you don't seem nuts or something, or you don't seem obsessed. But when you're lying in bed at night and it's 3 a.m. and these things are going through your head, you are obsessed and you are emotional. The wars don't end when you sign the peace treaties. They go on in the memory of the veteran, but they also go on in the lives of the children of veterans who have to live with these fathers like this guy. and the wives and the mothers and the fathers of veterans, the ripple effect goes way, way out beyond veterans themselves. Families are affected big time, sometimes more so than the veteran himself or herself.
In Dad's Maybe book, you talk about carrying a letter from a young woman with you when you made speaking appearances. And it sounded like to me that she had a need to learn about her father's experiences, and she was able to start to fulfill that need through the things they carried by reading that. And her father found it and started to read it, and they talked a little bit about it. I think the documentary film, The War and Peace of Tim O'Brien, and Dad's Maybe book, and all of the other work that you've done, it's something that I think at one point Meredith said it was a gift to your children. Both of the works are things that will last long after all of us are gone, and it won't be just your children, but also their children, and maybe generations from now.
I think every writer and probably every filmmaker does it ultimately for mankind in general. It's for man. We're all going to die, but there are those who will follow us. And your hope is that you've given a gift to the human species, something that's beautiful, even if it's ugly in the things that occur, the events that occur. There's something salvaged out of the ugliness, which is how the human spirit can endure the unendurable. We can somehow keep marching ahead. And every one of us does it every time we get out of bed, because somehow we make ourselves, through some act of incredible willpower, we make ourselves forget that we're all going to die. Who wakes up thinking, oh man, I'm going to die someday, and then go through your whole day thinking that? You couldn't do it. You'd go insane probably, or else you'd commit suicide. But somehow we all find the wherewithal, the psychic equipment to keep going forward through our lives, despite the knowledge there's going to be an unhappy ending, at least in a human sense. And that's something that the human, I think the human species has equipped itself psychologically for just moving forward. And it's a kind of miracle that we're all able to do that, to sort of endure the unendurable. That's how I felt in Vietnam, but now as an old man, I feel I'm enduring, my approaching mortality in the same kind of way. I'm not freaking out. I'm able to write and work and move forward. And all of us in our own ways are able to do that. It's a remarkable human trait.
Well, Tim and Aaron, I know that the audience, I'm hoping they would like to ask you some questions, but I just had one more question for each of you. What are you each working on next? Aaron, are you working on another film?
I am. I'm working on something completely different. A dance competition film. It really is different, but that is kind of the life of a documentary filmmaker, the life I chose. The film about Tim was personal to me on so many levels, because I had wanted to be a writer for a long time, head and heart. Like I really was very invested in and I still am in books. I love movies, but books are in a way still my touchstone. So it's difficult to do a film that's completely different, but it is also refreshing in that way. And so this is a film about a worldwide dance craze called whacking that's now a social media phenomenon. So it's very like, you know, kinetic, and the dance is pretty wild to look at. And that was not a good demonstration of it, by the way. But yeah, so it's kind of completely different in every possible way.
And Tim, what are you whacking at now?
Well, today I hit number 66,000. That's how many words I'm at. And that's probably 2/3 of a really long novel. I thought that Dad's Baby Book was going to be my last, and now I know it's not going to be. It's an impossible book to summarize. I'm no good at that anyway. I wouldn't know how to summarize the things they carried in like a little, 25-word summary. I couldn't do it. But I can say this much, that it's been fun. And that's a great sign. Fun in the hard, struggling, how do you write a good sentence kind of way. And another good one, and another good one. But because the characters surprise me, they say things that I write what they say, but I don't feel that I'm writing it. I go to work thinking, well, maybe this will happen. And they don't want to go there. They want to go someplace else. Yesterday, when I quit writing, I had a man and a woman in Bemidji, Minnesota, on a lake. They had been divorced 10 years, and they'd been fighting vehemently for this whole 10 years. And out of nowhere, the woman says to the guy, they're walking along a lake shoreline, and says, will you take my arm? And I didn't expect her to say that. And then later she says, may I have a kiss? And I sure as hell did not expect that. I expected exactly the opposite. I expected contention. That's the plot of the story. So I'm sort of moving away from my own plot, but that's good, because it takes preconceived plot or the kind of the general notion of somewhere new. It's a chaste kiss. It's an ambiguous kiss. It's a kiss that makes no promises at all. Neither is promising each other anything. It's a shy kiss, almost a first kiss after 10 years of divorce. So that's where I am. I got two people that I left yesterday kissing, but I don't know what they're going to do next. Are they going to stay in that, put up a pup tent on that shoreline and camp out for 10? I don't know what the hell they're going to do, but I don't want to know. It's the same with my life. If I knew exactly what was going to happen to me tomorrow, who the hell would want to live it? Because everything is going to happen, and then it happens. Life would be so dull, and I don't want that.
If the characters are in Minnesota, maybe they could take a day trip to Dubuque and visit Galena.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea.
It sounds like the things they carried may be a motion picture soon. Are you involved in that at all, or what do you think?
Yeah,
about
I've been involved. I co-wrote a script with two other people, the guy who bought the book and his lawyer, who's like a Harvard, Berkeley, smart Asian woman. And the three of us kind of did it together. I did almost all the writing, and then they would chip in with, oh, I don't like that word, that kind of stuff. Drove me nuts, but we did it together. Who knows? I don't know if it'll be a movie. Hollywood is like a bunch of Minnesota black flies. They buzz all around you, and then they go somewhere else, wherever the walleye pike is rotting. And then they come back to you. That's what Hollywood is like. They love you one day, you're nothing the next day, then they're back in love. I have no idea. All that I really care about is that their checks don't bounce. And so far that hasn't happened. That a writer sometimes, I'm not crazy about the idea of having a movie. I'm crazy about more money. But the problem with a movie of a novel is that those who see the movie then have the actor's face in their head as they're reading your book, especially if they haven't yet read your book. You're not inventing the character as you do with a novel in your head as you're lying in bed reading a book. You have all the Robert Redfords popping up, and then there's Al Pacino, and there's Marlon Brando, all peopling a book that is about none of those actors. So I'm not really crazy about it. If they just give me the money and not make the movie, then I'd be really a happy guy.
If anyone would like to ask a question, I think there are two options that would work. If you could say in the Zoom chat, I would like to ask a question, and you don't mind being on video, then I'll turn your video on and let you ask a question. Or if you prefer not to be on video and you don't mind being anonymous, if you could type in your question in the chat, and then I'll try to read that. And I hope if everyone asks maybe one question or maybe one and a follow-up, then it would give everyone a chance to ask a question. Let me see here. I'll have to, looks like we have some things coming up in the chat. Someone said the credit card scene at the gas station made me laugh out loud. Thanks to Tim and Aaron for the comic relief.
I've had to swear to a dozen of my very good friends that I did not know what was going on during that scene. Everyone's like, why didn't you help him? What's the matter with you? But you know, when you're filming and you're so focused, and I'm also doing the sound as well. So it really was like a one-man band kind of situation. I was so focused on just framing things up and making sure that I'm following the action correctly. And I did not see that he had made a mistake, you know, initially. So I really couldn't, and I'm telling this to you, Tim, also.
I was wondering why you didn't give me a hand. Now I know.
But when it did happen, yeah, it made me laugh for a long time too. So, and I'm glad it's in the film, because it's just another one of those scenes that, you know, everyone can relate to, and you're just like grateful that like Tim has allowed us to see that even he, you know, has these troubles, that technical problems that we all have. You know, it's another aspect of the film that I really like, that, you know, you don't usually get like warts and all portraits of people of stature, you know, and this film kind of breaks down a lot of that, you know, the mythologies and all that stuff we wrap around, you know, celebrities and people we admire.
There's another comment. The other day we had a test of the Zoom session, and Aaron, I caught a glimpse of your family, and it looked like they were waving to Tim. And the comment someone wrote, clearly Aaron's family and Tim should meet in Dubuque at the exhibition. It's kind of regrettable that COVID's going on and we couldn't have you're here in person.
Yeah, we both regret it. We wanted to go. We wanted to see each other in person, and we wanted to see you people. That it's a different experience when you're on the screen and all I'm seeing are a bunch of names in front of me. And I miss that part of it. Aaron hasn't mentioned this yet, but he traveled with me extensively during the first 3 years of this project. He went to New England with me. We went to the Bahamas as a family together, his family and mine. He went to Chicago to a big event there, and at the Chicago Hilton, it was just huge ballroom filled with military people. Lots and lots of places we went together. We went to Las Vegas to a magic convention together. And we spent time on the road where we really got to know each other in different kinds of settings with different people around us. And that found its way into the film. I think it's got a pretty nice strain of the film, that it's not all set in a house. It's set all over the country, really.
Here's a comment for Tim. I think in Dad's Maybe book and also in the film, there is a scene or a passage where you talk about replacing the word war with the phrase killing people. And this comment says, I like that idea. That's what war is.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite chapters. I think it strikes half of our country, almost right down the middle, as somehow unpatriotic. That killing people, we shouldn't call a thing what it is. The actual phrase I suggest is a long one. So wherever we use the word war, we should say killing people, including children. So, you know, in the Gettysburg Address, in the Constitution, in the halls of Congress, whatever you use the word war, which seems these days is about every other word, you gotta say that instead. You go through Tolstoy, it's not called War and Peace, it's called Killing People, including Children and Peace. And every other book that has a title, the word war in it. I recommended a complete overhaul of the English language where we simply delete the word war from the dictionaries and stop using it. You think the military would just love that idea, because they're the people that love blunt talk, you know, and directness and that sort of thing. You think they go crazy about it. It's not it's kind of facetious in a way, because I know it could never happen. It's the kind of thing that should happen, but will never happen. But the fact that it will never happen ticks me off as well. Just the knowledge that it can't happen, that makes me upset. But I get upset about everything. So what the hell? I get upset about Tootsie Rolls.
We have a question from Jade Scarpa, and I'm going to unmute the video and microphone for Jade.
Okay, I've got 2 pages here, so I got to find Jay.
Hi. I don't think my video is on yet, but thank you so much for being with us tonight, and thank you for your service. And so I'm one of the many probably high school English teachers that are here, and it is my 4th year teaching the things they carried. It's always, you know, it's completely revolutionized my, you know, classroom and my English class. And got me to have such a close relationship with so many of my students as we read. And I deeply apologize for my dog barking. But as an English teacher, oh, here, I was starting my video. I think
There you are. Hi.
There we are. So as, you know, an English teacher, I tend to look at a lot of the literary elements as we go throughout the book. And I tend to really hyper-focus in on potential biblical symbolism, mythological symbolism, and archetypal symbolism. And one of my kids finally said to me, what if this is not at all what Tim O'Brien meant? And what if we are, you know, what if you just think, you know, Jimmy Cross is, you know, this representation of Jesus maybe with the cross, but maybe that's, you know, Tim O'Brien would be mad that we all are just sitting here analyzing all of this symbolism. So one of my questions for you was, did you have any intention in writing, you know, kind of weaving a lot of symbolism or potentially, you know, biblical archetypal symbolism in any way throughout your stories?
It's a great question, and the answer is kind of cool. Jimmy Cross. My dad worked with a guy named Merv, M-E-R-V, Cross, and I was searching for a name, and I thought the word cross was cool. I typed it, but as soon as I typed it, the symbolism hit me in the head. I thought, wow. So I didn't plant it in the book. It was kind of accidental. But I do recognize it when it's there, and then I use it. I make use of it. So carrying a cross, you know, Jesus carrying the cross up to Calvary, and all the other kinds of. There's a whole bunch of religious symbolism in the book, but it didn't come out of religion, and it didn't come out of symbolism. It became a symbol like a kind of accident where you recognize it and then you make use of it. I think most writers work that way. I know of no successful writers who intentionally say to themselves, I'm going to implant a symbol in this sentence and then make use of it. I've never met a writer who's done anything like that. I think when Moby Dick was written, that the whale was just a friggin' whale, and that was it. And then I'm sure that Melville saw the symbolism, and it developed in the course of that fat novel, and it became very religious. But it's the becoming. So I think what the answer to your question is, yeah, I recognize the symbolism and I make use of it. I develop it, but I don't intentionally implant symbols. They just come into books. In the book I'm working on now, I had to invent the name for a handgun. I didn't want to use Smith & Wesson or all the common words that you'd read in, the ordinary. So I just made up a word or a name. I called mine a Temptation 38 caliber. And just the word temptation, as soon as I typed it, I didn't even think about why I chose it. But later in the book, way down, this gun begins to tempt the person who owns it, who's had a really rough time in his life, that guy on the beach with the divorced wife I'm talking about. And at one point in the novel, he decides he's going to shoot himself in the head in front of another character. Not because he's wants to die so much as he doesn't like the other character and he wants to give the other character a terrible experience. That's a big price to pay for revenge, I guess, to shoot yourself in the head. But it's tempting to him. He doesn't do it. But the temptation is there. But it's funny how just out of a word, symbols grow, and sometimes you throw them away. They're not good. They don't belong in the book. Other times they're really compatible with the book, and those are the ones you keep. But what a great question.
Thank you. Yeah, I was reading The Power of Myth by Joseph Campbell, and I felt like there were so many things that he was saying just about mythology and just the way that we tell stories. And I was kind of just thinking about, what the intention was there. And thank you so much for answering that for me. I really appreciate it.
Campbell's book is amazing. It's really one of the great books ever, I think.
I keep it like not even 5 inches away from me when I'm sitting at my desk.
Good. Keep it there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This kind of leads into the next question. I was wondering what books and authors were favorites of Tim's, and do you like to read about others' war or combat experiences? And then Aaron, what are a few of your favorite documentary films?
I don't go out, I don't seek out war books. I get a lot sent to me. And like any other genre, most of them aren't very good. Some are okay, and a couple of them are magnificent. So I loved Michael Herr's Dispatches. I think it's one of the great books that have the subject of war ever written. It has a rock and roll musical sound to that. His prose is edgy and cool and tight and just great prose. And it has this sound of like the sort of a mix of the Grateful Dead and the Doors, if you can imagine those two coming together. It's just remarkable writing, just as writing. And every other writer whom I respect and know personally feels the same about that book. It's just a beautiful, beautiful book. And there are a couple of others that came out of Vietnam and one that's come out of the Iraq or Afghanistan thing that I find really good. But I don't look for them. I look for excellence no matter what it is. Right now I'm reading a history of LaSalle, starting up in the Great Lakes, actually starting in Montreal and coming down all the way through discovering the Ohio River, following the Mississippi. This is like 1650. The book I'm reading was written in 1865, something like that. by Francis Parkman, who wrote a book called The Oregon Trail, one of the masterpieces of American literature. Well, this book is a masterpiece too. I'm reading it because his sentences are so good. He knows the difference between farther and further, which most of Americans don't even get taught in 3rd grade like they should be. He knows the difference between lie and lay, and knows when to use, and a whole bunch of other really cool grammatical stuff. But there's an elegance to his prose that doesn't feel at all old-fashioned. It feels like just good, vigorous, informative, interesting prose. In the Oregon Trail book, he killed way too many buffalo for my taste. I mean, page after page, chapter after chapter of dead buffalo without having much of a sense of the environment and, you know, sort of slaughtering animals just for the sake of it. But though he was a pretty severe man when it came to killing buffalo, what an elegant writer he is. It's just so good.
Aaron, how about you? Is there are there filmmakers that you really admire?
Well, actually, the last 2 documentaries I saw happened to be about writing and words, just by coincidence, and they're really good, and I can recommend them. One was Collective, which I was nominated for an Academy Award last year. It's about these journalists in Romania who are covering the nightclub fire that happened there, and then in the midst of that, they uncover this massive healthcare fraud that's being perpetrated upon the people there, and it's just really compelling and makes you fear for the lives of those journalists and really admire what they do. And just last night, I watched this film called Writing with Fire, which is out this year also, which is another journalist writing related documentary. It's about the only newspaper in India run by Dalit women. I think that's how you pronounce it. They're untouchables. And these women are just ass kickers, man. And they're doing a lot of the same things that those journalists in Romania are doing, basically tackling really difficult subjects, putting themselves at risk, and telling stories that have to be told, you know, and making change. So I'd recommend those 2, and I watched them recently. So yeah, those were great. I'm also a big fan of like the Verite filmmakers, you know, Frederick Wiseman, D.A. Pennebaker, Barbara Koppel, the Maisels brothers, all those early Verite films. I really like the style and the approach.
There's someone in the audience, Kimberly Wickstrom. I'll see if I can unmute you and let you start your video.
Hello, thank you so much. I have a question for Aaron and Tim. When you were writing Dad's Maybe book, and then Aaron, when you were filming the documentary, was there ever anything that your family, Tim and Aaron, Tim's family, thought was too intimate to share with the world? And what happens when that happens? Like, if you really love the scene or the chapter, how do you kind of balance, you know, what you want to say with hurting someone's feelings or maintaining their privacy?
Well, I'll say that I as a filmmaker, I kind of have a personal credo whenever I'm making a film like this, where I spend a lot of time with people, and then I'm making a film at the end that kind of in an hour and a half summarizes like 4 or 5 years of experience. And that credo is like, I show the final film to them before anyone else. you know? So if there are scenes like that, they will get flagged. And I have to say that I've never had anyone ask me to take a scene out or to radically change anything. Because I think I like to think that if you do your job well and you're respectful and you're treating people with dignity, that you're not showing them in a compromising way, and they'll see themselves and see the truth of what or an element of the truth that you're portraying. But Tim can talk about seeing a scene that I filmed that was pretty intimate with Meredith and his two boys. And he didn't know that I had filmed that scene. And I was kind of like wondering, how's Tim going to react when he sees this? And I'll let Tim continue the story.
Yeah, it was really an eye opener for me. I just talked to Aaron about it a couple of days ago because it struck me so powerfully. The scene is of Meredith and my two sons, who were then probably maybe 12, 13, something like that. I think not yet teenagers. They were lying in bed together, and they were talking about, my younger son has an expression called Dad's bad time. And what that means is when the work on the books is going badly, and I get tense and I get quiet and I get edgy. And they were talking about this, and I had never thought it affected others. I thought it just affected me when I'd go silent at the dinner table or when I would get edgy. It was kind of heartbreaking in a way, but also really made me feel loved, because I could tell in their voices that this was hurting them only because they could tell I was hurting over the work going badly that day or that week. Sometimes it would go for 2 weeks when it would be hard to even write a decent sentence, much less a page or two. And so it was eye-opening, but in a kind of beautiful sort of way, how much they loved me and worried about me. It was an intimate scene. I think it might be the best scene in the whole movie. If I had to pick one, that's the one I would pick. Though it's filled with a lot of great scenes. I mean, lots and lots of them. But probably it struck me because I was the man that was making them lie there in bed, talking about Dad's bad time.
Well, it was really touching, honestly, to see in the documentary what a good father you are and how much they love you. It's really sweet boys.
Good. Thank you.
Tim, there's a comment, and I think this is referring to when you said that you weren't really comfortable with a movie being made of your book or of any book really, because you get the face of the actor stuck in your mind and it gets associated with a book. This comment from a viewer says, interesting Tim would say that. I had an idea of what Tim looked like until I saw this film. The two were not close. And then he says, thank you, Tim, for serving.
Thank you.
Tim, in the things they carried, you were in the boat between the US and Canada and said you went back to the US because you did not have the courage to go to Canada. So you went to war. As a Vietnam combat veteran, is this the most important part of your, the speaker saying, as a Vietnam combat veteran, this is the most important part of your book that I share with my students.
Well, good. I mean, it's not really me in that situation. It's a character who has my name, but it's not me. I never went to the Canadian border. I never got in a boat and almost went to Canada. But I did think about it a lot. How do I get out of this damn war? I don't believe in the war, and I don't want to die, and I don't want to kill people in a war I hated. Psychologically, it was harder than Vietnam itself, that those months before. I had my draft notice. Canada was 8 hours away. I lived in southern Minnesota, and 8 hours later, I could be in Canada. And I'd lie in bed at night, knowing in 2 months I'd be in the army, and then a few months later, I'd be in Vietnam for sure. Thinking, what should I do? And what's the right thing to do? I love my country. I don't want to be thought of as a treasonous or a traitor or a coward. And it seemed at the time that the really brave thing to do was to cross the border, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I never could get in my car and start driving north. Even when I was in basic training and later in advanced infantry training near Seattle at Fort Lewis, Canada was then only 90 minutes away. And I thought about it as I was on the rifle range and as we were marching around the woods of, outside Seattle. I think about, I could just get on a bus and I'd be in Canada in an hour and a half, and this would be over, this nightmare. But I couldn't make myself do it. I think what it was really was not cowardice exactly. It was a fear of embarrassment. What would the people in my hometown say? It'd be like if you grew up in Dubuque and you knew a whole bunch of people in your neighborhood. What are the people in Dubuque going to say if you get drafted and you go to Canada? And you picture your mom and dad like sitting in a restaurant and they overhear somebody saying, do you hear what the O'Brien kid did? He went to Canada. And somebody else saying, what a coward, what a creep. And how my mom and dad would react to that, and my brother and my sister and my friends and my girlfriend. It was not wanting to be humiliated and embarrassed myself, but it was also not wanting to hurt them with how they would have to carry that through their lives. Vietnam, by comparison, was psychologically easier for me anyway. I was terrified the whole time, but I wasn't in control anymore. There were no buses to get on and no cars to drive away from the war. You were in it. And the goal for me and for all my friends was basically to stay alive. By that point, the war was unwinnable. It was a stalemate. We certainly knew we weren't winning the war. And we were pretty sure we were losing it. Even though we'd win the firefights, we were losing the war. And all you could do really is try to keep yourself and your friends alive. And that's pretty much how I spent my year, trying to stay alive and not fall asleep on guard so I could keep my friends alive and just have their backs, just like they had my back. Psychologically, the months prior to Vietnam were a lot tougher on me than the war itself.
A few years ago, when the Kim Burns documentary about Vietnam came out, we had a program here at Carnegie-Stout Library with Elaine Palin, who was the sister-in-law of Carl Anthony Palin. And he is an Army specialist from Dubuque who went missing in action in South Vietnam in 1971. He was a crew member of a small aircraft, and his flight took off and it never landed. It was lost and it's never been found. And his parents, at least until recently, were still alive, and they've been waiting for a recovery, and it's still going on. Sometimes, occasionally, they do find soldiers and bring them home. But I remember Elaine telling me that Tony was drafted and he didn't want to go. And his reasoning about it was, if I don't go, someone else is just going to have to take my place. So that, I think she said that that's what he was thinking, and it seems like this a kind of a fatalism that, and it just seems like such a terrible question to put to someone, like, what are you going to do in this situation where there's no answer that's good. Another person in the audience has this comment: the title for the film, The War and Peace of Tim O'Brien, I initially thought about that piece as somewhat of a resolution, but the further into the documentary, it seems to me to be sort of a piece that is in pieces. In a poem, Gerard Manley Hopkins referred to a piecemeal piece, and I'm thinking now that maybe that's as good as it gets.
That's a really great comment. I think maybe that is as good as it gets.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the word peace, I mean, coming to peace with a war, it's not just a cliche, it's a worthless and useless and tattered cliche that doesn't help you any. The idea of peace, P-I-E-C-E, is kind of how I feel. There are bits and pieces. I have good friends from that war. That's a good piece I can hold on to. I had nice experiences, that is, good ones, of kindness and generosity during the war. By and large, it wasn't that way. By and large, it was unkind and ungenerous, and it was murderous and homicidal. But there were good things too. When you come home and you think about it all, there's no settled peace that can come to you. The stuff rattles around in your head like old bones in your head. Some of them positive, most of them negative, but they just rattle away, and none of them ever settle. The way you think of, you sort of settle into peace. You come to terms with something. But there are certain things you don't come to terms with ever. Your dad dies, he's dead forever. How are you going to come to peace with the loss of your father or your mother or your children if they die? You're not ever going to come to peace with it, and you shouldn't come to peace with it. You should mourn and grieve, because that's how you feel. So the cliche is almost a false cliche, and certainly deceptive. There are certain things that you shouldn't come to peace with and shouldn't heal from. You should always feel some guilt about killing people, even if it's in a war. I'll never come to terms with that, and I shouldn't. I should have to gnaw on it. I did it. Why not gnaw on it? You don't say to a guy like Ted Bundy, come to peace with your murderous activities. You wouldn't dream of saying that thing to him. You put him in a gas chamber or whatever, however he was, executed. There's certain things you shouldn't come to peace with, and killing people for me is one of them. It should always be there. Something you should be gnawing on.
Aaron, did you have a comment about that, or the title of the film?
Well, that's just a perfect example of what Tim was saying with regard to, words that you come up with, and then later they take on larger meaning as you're kind of developing the story, or, this person saw a really good interpretation of the title. And the way that title came about was I was reading War and Peace, Tolstoy, for the first time. And about halfway through, I thought, holy shit, this would be a good title for the film, The War and Peace of Tim O'Brien. And then, like, the more I kind of settled in with that title, I really liked the idea of the film being about Tim's contradictions, which were another aspect of his personality that really drew me to him. He was a soldier who who hated war, hated that he was sent to war. He's a very sensitive, empathic person, as I think you can tell. But he also takes no bullshit, and he's tough as nails. He's a 2-pack a day smoker who very much wants to stay alive. He's an obsessive loner, as writers have to be, and yet now he was a family man. And like, all those contradictions really interested me about Tim.
Yeah, even the word war and peace, when it applies to me, the peace is not the peace, though, of a settled man, that content and harmony with the universe. My kind of peace is still the ongoing struggle of Vietnam, and the greater struggles of, how do you be a good person in this world we all live in. It's a difficult thing to do. And to keep a firm grip on your sense of morality and the ways that human beings ought to behave. I'm not at peace with any of that. And that makes the irony of the title kind of cool, I think, that the piece of Tim O'Brien is not very peaceful.
Yeah, I always thought there was like a parentheses, like the war and the quest for peace,
right,
in my head. Because like Tim is saying, how do you and how can you really achieve that,
Annette Hansen has a question, and I'll unmute Annette. And then we have a few more questions after that. I don't want to go too long, but I'm going to try to get through just a couple more, if that's all right. Let me see if I can unmute Annette.
Okay.
Yes, are you there, Annette?
Yep. Don't have a video, but
Okay.
I'm here. I could
Go
turn
ahead.
on my video if you want.
Oh, that's okay. It's up to you. Just go ahead with the question.
Okay. Yeah. So anyway, I wanted to thank you for the guts it took to do this documentary. I really appreciate it. It was not an easy thing for you to do, I'm sure. And I'm the person in the audience who is from Worthington.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah. So
turn your video on.
Okay, I'd love to. I'd have to give permission to start my video.
Oh, okay.
Let me see here.
Mike is
Okay,
going to make you pay $50 to turn it on.
there
Okay,
you go.
there I am.
Hi.
Hi. I feel uncomfortable sharing my disgusting, disorganized Zoom background. So the willingness to do this documentary is just impressive to me. So anyway, my family moved to town about the time that you went off to war, but in the late 70s, it was right after you had published Going After Cacciato. And I was working in the library. Your dad would come in regularly to read the Daily Globe and, harass the librarians a little bit. Great sense of humor. But I had to ask him one day, because there weren't that many O'Briens in town. They're all Scandinavians, right?
Mhm.
So I said to him, "Are you related to Tim O'Brien?" And he didn't have to say a word. His face just exploded in this huge smile. And I mean, the sense of joy and pride that he showed, he didn't have to
Wow.
say a word. And so when I was watching your documentary, and 10 minutes into the film, you say, "I wish my dad had left behind a note," it just hit me like, oh my God, he did. It wasn't in the form or the time that you expected, but he left that experience back with me to give to you today. And I've been trying to tell you, I wanted to tell you the story like 20 years ago. I actually I had plans to travel from Baltimore up to New York when you were going to do a book signing. And I was going to meet you there and tell you the story. That particular Saturday was 2 days after 9/11.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Wow.
so that obviously didn't happen. But anyway,
Well, it happened now. Thank you.
yeah, well, I didn't know if this would be a good story for you to hear or
Oh,
not, but I figured,
Aaron and I know how good it is. That,
okay, good.
I never really knew if my mom and dad had ever read my books. They didn't say anything to me. I think probably my mom did, but I was never sure if my dad had or not. And so the fact that he was proud makes me feel really good, because I didn't know
Good.
that.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I think that's a Minnesota thing. I've written 2 books. Neither of my parents read my books, but they were proud that I did it.
Yeah, maybe that's what it was. Yeah. Well, thank you, Annette.
Good, good. Thank you.
There's another question. How can we create more conversations that illuminate, and how can we create more conversation that illustrate the things that we share rather than the things that keep us in our silos? This is a conversation about a documentary about a fiction writer, nonfiction writer, father, magician, hosted by a library and a museum, about the intersection of art making and war, with veterans and English teachers and curators and students. I guess how can we keep doing that?
We just have a cup of coffee and keep going. I don't know what else to do. I need about a pot of coffee. This is like 6 hours past my bedtime. I'm a guy that gets up at 3 in the morning. No, I think, it's a great question. I think it starts really in the family, talking to our children, talking to our wives and husbands and, mothers and fathers. The conversation does not have to go out into the big wide world. It can begin at home and maybe even stay at home. And certainly it's a great starting place.
There's a comment and a question. I'm a college student in Dubuque, and currently in one of my classes we are studying the things they carried. One of the ideas that keeps coming up is how much of the book is from personal experience. So how much is from personal experience anyway?
Well, 3%, not very much. Very, very little. It's been a bugaboo that's been following me now for what, 35 years, however long that book's been out. It's called autobiographical or semi-autobiographical. It's neither. It's a work of fiction. It would be like calling The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn autobiographical or semi, but Mark Twain knew the river just as I knew Vietnam. He did not get on a raft when he was 12 years old and go down and meet Jim and sailed on that river and meet the Duke later on and so on. None of that. It's invented. So is the things they carried. There is a difference. The difference is I use my own name as the main character in the book. I dedicate the book to the characters in the book, which sounds as if I'm dedicating them to the book to real people. I'm not. They're all invented, including the Tim O'Brien character is invented. He does things, says things, and thinks things that I never thought and still don't. I disagree with some of the stuff he has to say, but he's this alter ego that says things that I don't like too much. Other times he says exactly what I think. But it's invented. It's my original idea with the things they carried was it just seemed like a fun idea. Why not use my own name as a character? And then why not try to make the readers believe this really happened? Make them believe they're reading nonfiction. Make them really believe it, but then periodically remind them that they're not reading nonfiction. So every, 30 pages or so, I remind the reader, this is a work of fiction. On top of that, at the front of the book, on the title page, it says a work of fiction. That means it's made up. That's what the word means. So it began as a game, kind of, or a fun thing to do. And then it became a kind of challenge, like a technical, writerly challenge. How can I do these two things simultaneously? Makes everything up, but make it feel real. And so I found all kinds of devices that would help me do that. The most conspicuous being using my own name, but 100 other smaller, more subtle devices to try to make it feel like a novel that is real. I'd never seen it done before. I don't think, and I think now I'm beginning to understand why, because now I'm saddled with the odd feeling that a work that I struggled, to invent and imagine is now being treated as semi-autobiographical, when in fact it's not. It's only autobiographical in the sense that I was a soldier, I was in Vietnam, and a couple of the incidents, that 3% I mentioned, a couple of the incidents did grow out of real things that happened, but they aren't replications of what happened. They start with what happened, but then they go somewhere else entirely that never occurred. There are maybe 3 or 4 of those, but even those are not nonfiction. They're almost entirely invented too. So it's a hard question. It's one that Aaron hears me, complaining about constantly. If you've heard it for 4 years, I did it with a lot of dirty words.
We're just about done. There's one more question and just a couple of short comments. This question is about those early morning hours scrubbing the kitchen floor. I scrub bathroom grout with a toothbrush. Are you writing things out during those sessions, or just clearing your head, or sort of wakeful dreaming? Or is it a strategy for insomnia? I sometimes find deeper story issues while scrubbing.
It's you get out of bed at 3 in the morning and you got all these bumblebees of dream going through your head. Some are about my mom and dad in Worthington, and some are about Vietnam, and some are about my children and so on. Some are scary, some are fun, but they're all that stuff. When you come out of sleep and you join the waking world, for a while you've got that history with you. And I'm on my mind as I'm scrubbing doing the dishes and washing the floor for I do that for about an hour every morning. It's a way of letting myself think about what I had dreamed about and how any of it might fit into a book that I'm working on. Now and then I would stop washing the dishes and I jot something down. I remember jotting down a memory of this is for Dad's maybe book, which is nonfiction, of my 12th grade English teacher in Worthington, a woman named Miss Wick, who was, I don't know, she looked like she was 1,000 years old, but she was probably like a lot younger than I am now. But she's got grayish hair, and she was a stickler for grammar. And I remember how she she taught English with her breasts. That is, she would bounce as she did like Yeats, and everybody was mesmerized by this old woman going like this. And that memory was like this butterfly kind of going through my head. I hadn't thought about her in years and years. And I did put her in the book, and she remains in the book. I changed her name, although I'm sure she's long since dead. But she was a kind of inspiration for me, where she made English fun. Up until that point, it had been pretty rote. Learn grammar, learn sentence construction, learn how to diagram sentences. But she made it fun. She loved literature. She loved what she taught, and she was a damn good teacher too. She had a way of teaching English that was stern in an old-fashioned way, and yet full of the esprit of life, the joy of life, that was quite amazing. And she did find her way into the book.
Well, the last couple of comments are, thanks so much for the discussion. Wonderful discussion. Thank you. Thanks for being here on Veterans Day. Someone writes, today, Veterans Day, many people have a day off. Thank you, Tim, for giving part of your day to us and for staying so late with us. And They also say, thank you, Mike, for leading the discussion, also a veteran. And thank you very much. The video will be available in a couple of days, and we'll share the links out with people. Susan Henricks, our former library director here at Carnegie-Stout, is leading a discussion of the things they carried at the library on November 30th. And the books can be checked out now at the library. And we're also doing the 10 copy giveaway. So I'll pick the winners and notify everyone within a couple of days. So watch for that. We're really excited and looking forward to meeting people at the opening reception on Saturday, November 13th of the exhibition Vietnam, the Real War at the Dubuque Museum of Art. And really thanks so much to Margie and all of the staff at the Dubuque Museum of Art for allowing us to be a part of this. It's really been an honor and a privilege. And most of all, thank you very much, Aaron Matthews and Tim O'Brien. We really appreciate it. And it was a rare opportunity to be able to meet you and to talk to you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you
Bye.
all.